I've got my special vegan Christmas T-shirt on that I wear every Christmas. There we are.
Right, okay, very good. Well, let's make it official. Hey, Earthlings. So welcome to the part that we are going to call Still Alive. Not quite sure whether this is going to make it as a standalone episode, but we shall see. So Ronnie, I've been talking for the last few hours, so say something.
Well, where do I begin? I think what we were going to talk about
At the very beginning, of course.
What we're going to talk about I've got a badge on this hat somewhere. That sits around there. I think that says Happy Vegan Christmas on it as well. Yeah, I think we were going to talk about what we would like to see happen next year. I think you've upstaged me with your hat, Roger.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to do that.
Oh well, there we are. Thanks, Linda, and to you, and to all our listeners. Hope everyone's having a nice day. I am. I've not had my Christmas dinner yet. I have that last thing at night because if I eat a big meal like that, I just fall asleep. And I thought, well, I don't want to be falling asleep if I've got to talk to Roger. So there we are.
So if you ever meet Ronnie Lee, people, and he's getting on your nerves, give him some tweet and he'll fall asleep.
Yeah. I'm sure I would. It doesn't take very much these days to send me off. We were gonna talk about what we'd like to see happen in terms of animal liberation, I suppose, in 2024, weren't we? So I don't know whether you want to go first on that, Roger, or you want me to go first.
We had a very interesting talk when Shibari and Tim were here, and two things came up. The distinction between plant-based and vegan came up, but I think we resolved that. But then in terms of this idea of it would be good to have a unified movement, and I always think, easier said than done, because I'm very attracted to the idea of a unified movement, because who wouldn't be? It's just bringing it about is so difficult, and so how do we get a unified movement, Ronnie?
The problem is I think there's two things. I think if you're kind of looking at a situation where people can discuss their differences in their views in a kind of rational and polite and respectful way with one another, I think we very much need that. And some people might regard that as a unified movement, but I think in terms of a movement where everyone's kind of pulling in the same direction, I kind of think that could be very, very difficult, because you kind of can't have unity where some people or some groups are running campaigns that are actually detrimental to campaigns that are being run by other people. In other words, where people are running welfarist campaigns that are just aimed at improving the conditions of other animals under oppression. It's very much my view that those can harm campaigns for animal liberation. In other words, they can harm campaigns where people are calling for the total liberation of other animals from oppression and exploitation by humans. And I think we've seen some examples of that in this year. And it can be very confusing, because you get groups that on one hand are running what I would call kind of liberation campaigns, where they're encouraging people to become vegan, and then they'll throw in a welfarist campaign, where what they're trying to do really is to just improve conditions of other animals on farms, for instance, or that the effect of their campaign will be only to do that, and it isn't a liberation campaign in the sense that it encourages veganism. And I think that's a problem. And so we're never going to have unity while people are running campaigns that, where one campaign is detrimental to another.
Yeah, well, Tim said that he would work with a welfare group if that welfare group was working for, say, the plant-based treaty, or structural change, this kind of thing. As I assume that you would be a bit more wary of that, then, would you?
I kind of think that's a bit different. I'm fine. I'm fine with plant-based treaty. I mean, I've signed plant-based treaty myself, and I've encouraged others to sign it. For instance, I persuaded local Green Party to sign it, and we were going to have a campaign locally to get our local authority to adopt the plant-based treaty, and then against the national trend, the local authority got taken over by the Tories. So now that's a much more difficult job than when it was run by an alliance of other parties. So that there would have been much better chance of getting it passed when they were in charge. So I've nothing against the plant-based treaty. I've nothing against people being encouraged to.
Well, I was more thinking of working with the welfare groups.
Well, you see, if it depends it depends what the people are saying. If you see, the thing is, if there's like a kind of subtext. If you're sort of campaigning just for better conditions for other animals under oppression, then basically the subtext of that is that, well, if we manage to obtain the better conditions for the other animals, then everything would be okay. And I think that's that's the difficulty with those sort of campaigns. That's kind of what it's. I mean, I'll give you an example from I learned from years ago. Louise and I were for 13 years we ran a campaign against the greyhound racing industry, and our campaign really was a very simple one. We saw that the industry was really sustained by ordinary people attending the dog tracks, and by ordinary people betting on the greyhounds, because a percentage of bets went to the industry. So our campaign was aimed at educating ordinary people about what happened to the dogs, so that they no longer attended or bet on dog racing. That was our campaign, and we had groups throughout the country who held. They weren't really. They were kind of not really protests. It was kind of more demonstrations outside tracks to educate people about what happened to dogs. Like, you bet they die. If you bet on the dogs, that results in dogs dying, and it kind of was a very successful campaign overall, and it played a big part in a lot of these tracks closing down simply because their attendances went down, and they were no longer financially viable. And at the time, the League Against Cruel Sports launched a campaign where they said, we want the dog racing industry. We want the dog racing industry to, there's all these dogs being killed, because of the dog racing industry. And mainly they were talking about dogs killed on the tracks, although that's only a minority of dogs that are killed by the industry, the ones that actually die on the tracks. Same with horse racing. Well, what the league was saying was they want the industry to put more money into the welfare of dogs, into helping to get these dogs rehomed and into the welfare of dogs. But they refused to come out totally against the dog racing industry. And we felt that their campaign harmed ours, because we felt that if people go into the dog racing felt that, well, everything's going to be okay because the dog racing industry are going to put more money into the welfare and rehoming of the dogs. So that means, the problems are going to be sorted out, and we can continue to go to the dog racing. So we thought that that campaign by the League Against Cruel Sports was actually harming ours, because we were putting out a very clear message. This is totally unacceptable. This use of greyhounds, this exploitation of greyhounds, resulting in in the deaths of so many. This is totally unacceptable. So just don't support it. And we felt that what the league were doing was kind of muddying the waters. And so, for me, that's an example of like one campaign harming another.
Actually, Vegan Paul says something. You'll be interested in this, given your experience of this anti-greyhound racing group gushing over a picture of greyhounds pulling a sleigh.
Yeah, you do sometimes get things like that, where obviously their understanding of the what constitutes the exploitation of other animals is obviously, in this case.
Yeah, but obviously, limited. Your particular group was, run by vegans, as it were, with an overall understanding of what's going on. In Ireland, you had Bernie Wright, and so she would never have gone with this. So, are we talking about this? Must have been a group which essentially was run by dog lovers, do you think, or?
Oh yes. I mean, there are some people involved in. We're no longer involved in that campaign, but other people took it on and kind of, in a sense, took it to new heights, because they've been able to kind of do more with it than we did, really. And so, it's continued to be successful. Tracks have continued to close. The industry, certainly in the UK, is still shrinking, for instance. So it's still, campaign's still successful. But no, not everyone, campaigning for greyhounds is vegan. A lot were, a lot of our local activists were vegan and were sort of local animal rights campaigners that included, campaigning against their local dog track as part of their overall work.
Yeah, it's more to do with if the prime movers are vegan, that kind of alters the ethos of things a little bit.
Yes, yeah,
Tim. I think you're a fan of the plant-based treaty, aren't you, Ronnie? Because Tim has put 3 plant-based treaty works on system change.
Well, you see, yes, I mean, the fewer animal products that are consumed, obviously, the better for other animals. That reduces the demand for animals to be other animals to be reared and slaughtered, doesn't it? So, there is a huge benefit, even if people just become plant-based, and if you persuade a local authority to include more plant-based meals on their menu and to substitute, animal products with with plant products, obviously that's a bonus. That's going to have a knock-on effect of reducing the number of animals that are slaughtered, isn't it? So it's positive, in that sense. Yeah. So yeah, I do think the plant-based treaty is a positive thing, but I also feel that if we are really going to obtain widespread fundamental change, if we're really going to obtain animal liberation, whatever else people are doing, it is vitally important that we have a hell of a lot more vegan education, that we are able to educate a hell of a lot more people to become vegan, and that means a hell of a lot more vegans need to be involved in outreach, and basically, talking about what I'd like to see next year. That really is the number one thing I'd like to see next year. A lot more vegans becoming involved in outreach, in vegan education, and especially becoming involved in their local areas, where obviously it's easier for them to do that. It's much easier normally for somebody to operate in their local area than travel long distances to do anything. So that's kind of really what I'd like to see more of next year. And especially, I suppose, what I'd like to see more of is more vegans not just becoming educators, not just being involved in outreach, but in actually instigating and organising outreach in their own areas. Because the people who are instigators are absolutely golden, and because I think that there are vegans. There's a lot of potential vegan activists. Just in terms of probably simple activism that almost all vegans could do. Such as delivering leaflets, helping at information stalls, that kind of thing. Very simple things that they can do in their own local area, in their own community. I think there's quite a lot of vegans around prepared to do that, but they need to be like encouraged to do that, by someone in their area. I mean, I know locally we've got probably we sort of had a door dropping campaign prior to Christmas, and it was to do with encouraging people to go vegan at Christmas and stay vegan afterwards. So to obviously consume vegan food at Christmas, but obviously then to stick with it. That was our campaign, and we had 12 people were involved in delivering leaflets in that for that campaign. But if I hadn't got in touch with those people and I hadn't encouraged those people to do that and delivered the leaflets to them for them to door drop, it kind of wouldn't happen. So that only happened, although we had the 12 people involved in the outreach. They were only involved in that because I instigated it, you see. And so you need people who are instigators. They're absolutely golden. They're absolutely vital, to the spread of outreach. And I would encourage all vegans to get involved in outreach, but also consider whether you can be an instigator and encourage others to get involved, because that's a really vitally important role that people can play. And I think the other thing, I think there's also an important role for for national organisations in terms of, because obviously the majority of leaflets that we distribute, we door drop, come from the various national groups, from Viva Animal Aid, for instance, some from the Vegan Society. Some we do occasionally produce leaflets ourselves, but our means are quite limited in that respect, and we can't do it all the time. And that would be the same really at the moment for pretty much everyone. Certainly certainly here in England. But what I'd like to see the national groups become much more focused on instigating and encouraging what I call community vegan outreach, which is like, educating, encouraging people, vegans, to become active in outreach in their local areas. And I think, one promising sign we've kind of seen, we've sort of seen Viva start to do that in earlier this year. They've started a kind of a movement. I'll just have a look. I've forgotten the name of it. Whereby that's what they're doing. They're encouraging people to set up local groups. It's called the volunteer community, and it's basically to encourage people to set up local groups in their area, and Viva supplying them with materials and everything to do that. And it's resulted in some groups being set up in kind of smaller and more localized places where you normally see outreach, because a lot of the street outreach, in fact almost all of it, tends to happen in the centre of big cities. People do Cuba Truth, or they do We the Free, or they do some other form of outreach, and that's great. It's brilliant that takes place. But what about all the other the other towns, suburbs of cities, even villages where it doesn't happen? We need outreach everywhere. And I think this move by Viva kind of is kind of going more in that direction. And they did a pre-Christmas campaign, very much along the same lines as the leaflets we were delivering, about people, become a vegan for Christmas and thereafter. And some of the stalls weren't in the centre of big cities. They were in the smaller towns, and I think that's a positive. That's a positive step. The vegan site have got something called the Volunteer Network, where it's not quite, I think, as developed as or widespread as what Viva are doing, but they too are encouraging people to kind of become active in their local area, and they're supplying people with materials. And I'd like to see more of that. Yeah, I'd like to see, Animal Aid become involved in that as well. And in other countries, I'd like to see, where there are kind of these national organisations that certainly have a vegan education. Where promoting veganism is part of their overall work. I'd like to see them kind of get do more of this.
Have you kept up with the Viva initiative? I mean, do you have any news about kind of the scope and how often they go out and that kind of stuff? And
they've had they tend to have there's two aspects of it. If someone wants to set up a local group and contact Viva, and Viva supply them with materials that like for a stall and stuff like that. And the other thing they do is they have every so often they have a specific campaign which they encourage people in local areas to get involved in. This was an example of that was the pre-Christmas campaign, and then they'll once again supply the materials for that. So that's kind of how they do it. And the Vegan Society as well will supply people with materials. I mean, quite often they want their own branding on it. Like the Vegan Society, they'll supply a tablecloth to people that's got Vegan Society on it, for instance. I think probably Viva do the same. They still kind of want their own branding, and kind of locally although we kind of we use leaflets from those groups. We've got our own, we've got our own table set up. We've got our own logo, and we operate like as an independent local group. We don't operate as a group that's connected to any other organisation. You see, but we will, we do get free materials, from these groups. And that's something that can happen over the world, all over the world, where you've got these national groups that have kind of got, where at least part of their work is campaigning for veganism. I'd like them to consider the importance of, community outreach, of getting outreach going in other areas apart from the centre of big cities, because we need to take the vegan message everywhere.
Yeah. Do you think that because I saw you shared some picture of Viva have got some gazebos, yeah? Do they give them out?
Well, I'm not sure they give the gazebo. I think kind of what they do with the gazebos is if someone organises an event locally and they're able to kind of send some of their people that work for Viva along to kind of help with that event, they'll bring the gazebo along. I'm not sure that they'll stretch to actually giving people those gazebos, but I think they'll provide other stuff with the stall. I think
kind of loan them out. Yeah,
and they may loan them out, and I think they kind of do. They've got these inflatable animals and stuff that's sometimes used to attract attention. I mean, they're probably, you probably need a bit of space for them. So in a more confined area in a smaller town, that might not work. But it's worth people getting in touch with them.
I'm just trying to think about how it works, because it sounds like an interesting idea. If you think back to the 1980s, Ronnie, when all the national groups had local contacts, and so you would. I mean, I was in Bradford at one point, and Liverpool and places and all that, and so there'd be a couple of people who would be like the Animal Aid contact, and somebody else would be BYV, somebody else will be NAVs, this kind of stuff. Now, I'm not sure the branding thing was as kind of was as developed back then. So it'd be hard to imagine that you kind of get a loan of a Viva gazebo, and they'll be happy to have Animal Aid stuff all over it as well.
Well, I don't know whether what you have on your stall is kind of up to you and how much they can monitor it. But I don't know what the stipulation on that, because like we locally haven't needed to do that because we've got our own banner with our own logo on and stuff. And we use leaflets from different groups and some of our own as well on our
Yeah,
site.
but say, for example, you did use the Animal Aid, tablecloth and, a big poster from the Vegan Society, you know, big banner at the back, and then inside the Viva gazebo, you know, what's going, you know, I mean,
I don't know, and I think this is it's a bit of a problem, and I'd kind of like to see a bit more coming together on this, where you know,
it should work in theory. It should work, shouldn't it? I mean,
you know, why be? We all want, you know, we all want veganism. We all want, you know, veganism to spread. So, you know, don't be so precious about your own logo and stuff. You know, let's kind of have a bit more sort of coming together on this, and maybe also that would avoid a lot of the duplication that takes place with leaflets and stuff. You know, on various issues. You know, I'd very much like to see that. That might be quite a hard thing to realise, you know, but I think if we look at the big picture, if we're thinking what is best for the spread of veganism, you know, forget about your own kind of you know, your own branding, but what is best for that, and surely kind of coming together on this is best way to do it.
Yeah. Okay. So just reverting back to what we've been talking about earlier, as I said with Shibari and Tim, it was a really good tribute to Benjamin Zephaniah, and also Tim did a alternative King's speech, which was quite good. And,
I'll have to go back and watch that. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, well, that was part of this kind of call for unity and this kind of stuff. And so, first of all, we got the issue of the personality of someone like Benjamin Zephaniah. Now, he was very kind of open and very kind of giving kind of person, involved in lots of different things. Didn't seem to discriminate between them, but would support everybody, as it were, generally speaking, going in the same direction, kind of thing. And so, I think that is something that is obviously quite an attractive idea. And Tim's other idea is that, and he's said this a couple of times in various places, that the kind of elders of the movement, and so that's us, those of us who are still alive, we should be aiding this gluing the movement together in unity rather than not. And I don't think he thinks that we are, and I think that we might not be, but for some good reasons too.
Well, I think there's a difference. I mean, as I said, there's a difference between people to be able to discuss things politely and civilly and rationally, and a lot of discussions aren't like that. Sadly, you see rows on Facebook all the time where people have, you know, different opinions, and so I think that, you know, in discussing our differences, we need to be a lot more civil with one another, really, you know.
Yeah, okay.
A lot more kind, you know, a lot kinder, and but that isn't the same as unity. You know, there are some things that can't be put together. Like I'm saying, you know, if someone is, and it's also kind of it's also to do with resources. You see, you know, you know, our movement as a whole, if you look at the, you know, the animal advocacy movement as a whole, we have limited resources. You know, we have only so many people, we have so much money, so much energy, you see, and it's kind of really important that all that's used as efficiently, as effectively as possible in working towards animal liberation. And that doesn't mean everyone should do the same thing, but I think there are some things that are clearly not the best use of those resources. For instance, if vegans are encouraged to embark on a welfarist campaign that kind of really, at the end of the day, is actually going to make no difference. I mean, we've had examples of that where there's been, you know, there's been an investigation into a particular farm. There's been campaigns to close that place down, or campaigns to get the RSPCA to remove their RSPCA assured label, isn't it? Or whatever, some people call it a red tractor from those places, or campaigns to get supermarkets to no longer purchase products from those farms. And now, like in reality, those campaigns don't make any difference, because all that happens is that the supermarkets would just buy those animal products from a different farm, where conditions are very likely to be just as bad as the one that they've been persuaded to no longer buy them from. And the RSPCA will continue to give its assured label to places that still oppress and exploit other animals, because that is inseparable from animal farming, of course. And thirdly, even if you persuade one of these places to close, you get one of these places closed, then as long as the demand continues, as long as the demand for animal products continues, for as long as people are continuing to consume these products, those products will be supplied from somewhere. So all that's happening is like one farm's loss is another one's gain. Closing one animal farm will just mean that other animal farms will produce more to make up for the loss in production that's been caused by that farm closing. So these campaigns actually make no difference in terms of moving us towards animal liberation, and yet so many vegans.
Just hang on a second though, because you've said that twice now. Don't make any difference. Now there was a lot of praise in the early part of the day for Joey's thing about the turkeys, and then of course we got the Animal Justice Project about the red tractor and all that kind of stuff. So those are the kind of things you're talking about. Joey is asking his people to contact the red tractor, and so when you say it doesn't make any difference, first of all, they'd push back on that and say, well, first of all, look at all the publicity, and secondly, they must have an idea that of this difference that is going to be made by getting their people to contact the RSPCA or contact Red Tractor. They think that's going to create a difference, right? And so, in other words, in the name of unity, shouldn't we support that?
Well, in a way, the problem isn't so much with the expose. The problem is with the messaging. If someone does an expose like that and says, look, these are the conditions that these animals are being kept. They're being kept in appalling conditions. And even if the animals weren't kept in, and that attracts attention, people, oh God, isn't that terrible? It causes people to be concerned, right? But then to go on to say, even if the animals weren't kept in those appalling conditions, it's still wrong. The animals are still being sent for slaughter at a fraction of their natural lifespan. They're still being exploited. They're still being oppressed. So all of it's wrong, right? And the answer to this is to become vegan, or if you're vegan already, the answer to this is to go out there and encourage other people to become vegan. So it's not the investigation I have a problem with. What I have a problem with is the messaging that comes out of it, because the messaging that comes out of it is actually a message that ends up really kind of as welfarist or in making no difference, because you close these places down, you stop a supermarket buying from those places, you get the RSPCA to remove their assured label from those places. It actually really makes no difference to the number of animals that are oppressed and exploited and slaughtered, for as long as people continue to consume animal products.
Well, I mean, there's obviously, that's what I'm saying. I think there'll be a pushback of that. For example, Joey's obviously got a reason why he wants his people to contact Red Tractor, and Animal Justice Project have got a reason why they organize a petition to go to the RSPCA, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, I know from our point of view, it kind of doesn't really make any sense, but it must for them.
I think it makes sense for them in terms. I think it's to do with being able to claim a victory, which a lot of people kind of seem to need, because if what your goal is if what the messaging is from these things is go and educate people to become vegan, then like, how do you assess how much success you're having? You know, it's quite, you know, we're out on the street, we're delivering leaflets, we're doing the other things, even if we're doing stuff on social media, trying to get people to go vegan. You know, we don't get a lot of feedback. It's obvious people are going vegan because we both became vegan because we received information about veganism. The more information we get out there in various forms about veganism and why veganism is really important to go vegan, we know the more people will become vegan because that's how we became vegan. But how do you quantify it? You know, I do get people come up to me and tell me that they've become vegan because of a stall I did or because of a leaflet I delivered. I do get that, but that's not massively often, and that's probably only a tiny percentage of people that have gone vegan because of those things. So you don't get the feedback, you don't get the sense of victory, you see. But if you manage to persuade a supermarket to no longer buy products from a particular farm or from a particular distributor or whatever, or you get the RSPCA to remove its assured label from a particular farm, or you even manage to force an animal farm to close down,
Maybe
then
that's not the important part of it, Ronnie. Maybe the important
yeah,
part of it is to get it in the newspapers.
well then yeah, but you see the thing is, if you get it in the newspapers, the really important thing is to, I mean, I wouldn't, it wouldn't be so bad if there was a vegan message, go vegan message alongside it, you see. But if what the publicity about is, you know, this is a horrific farm and we want this place closed down, then what people reading that newspaper will see is, oh well, that is a horrific farm, and isn't it terrible? But it's going to be closed down, so I don't have to worry now because I know that when I go and buy my, you know, my bacon or my beef or whatever, that will come from an okay farm because there's these people out there working to close down the bad farms. You see, so that it can be almost, you could say it's almost kind of harmful in that sense, and it'd be far better to aim the publicity, educating non-vegans to go vegan and encouraging vegans to get out there and spread veganism. That would be a much more effective and efficient use of the resources of our movement. And that's the thing. I don't have a problem with the investigation. I don't have a problem with them exposing, you know, the worst conditions, because I think that can be used to attract people. But then you do have to say it's all wrong. You do have to say, because otherwise people will think, well, look, you know, I'll make sure I get, you know, try and get stuff from a place where the conditions aren't like that, and then everything's okay. And of course it isn't.
Okay. Tim said this, which is interesting. This brings up a few things. Give me a little bit of time to develop my thoughts here. Some groups have confused messaging. Well, that raises the issue about whether consistent messaging in the way that Francione advocates for is actually as important as he would suggest. For example, you could get people who, I mean, let's take something like Meat-Free Monday. Now, neither of us like that, but people would probably say, well, I went vegan because of Meat-Free Monday, right? And then you've got the other side of the coin where somebody goes up to a stall and it's got live vegan, be vegan, and they go, no, I'm not going to do that, but I will do the reducitarian high welfare side of it. So that does create an interesting kind of conversation about whether consistency of message, which I adhere to instinctively, but does it actually really kind of matter? And then the other point you made, which is this idea, well, at least if they've got a go vegan part of their messaging to a kind of welfare campaign, at least that. Now, I think that creates a lot of problems because I think this is where it pulls the activists away from the public, because they start off by doing an expose, or they start talking about animal cruelty, or they start talking about animal abuse, and then they go vegan. Now, culturally, those things have got no connection, right? We've got to make the case. It takes a lot of work to get the public from one place to another, because they'll agree with you until the cows come home, so to speak, about oh yeah, animal cruelty is wrong. Oh yeah, animal abuse is wrong. And then you go, what about slaughterhouses? Oh well, that's different, because culturally it is, and we need to make the case of what's going on. Now, I'm not sure where writing to the RSPCA or writing to Red Tractor fits into any of that.
Well, that doesn't. But what I'm saying regarding the expose is we when we do street stalls, for instance, both of us will have things that will attract people, that make people come over and look, whether it's like, offering them free food, giving out free recipe booklets, something, and having like a big sign saying, free recipe booklets, so like we do. You have something to attract people, and once you've got people's attention, then you take them further down the road. You talk to them more, you give them more information, you educate them about the sort of like deep ethical issues, so to speak. And I feel that these exposes can be used in that way, that the kind of, look at these horrible conditions, that attracts people, but then it depends very much on what you say after that. And I think it's really
but
important.
even the first thing that he said, you know what it's like. You've seen this for years. It'll be the RSPCA will be contacted. Oh, we've never seen anything as bad as this before, and all this kind of stuff. And then we've got to sort this out. Yeah, we're going to clean this up and all. I mean, we know what's going to be said.
Well, you see, that's the part that I kind of would like to see changed. What I'm saying is, an expose is done, and instead of using that expose as a means of, like, putting pressure on the RSPCA to drop that particular farm from their assured scheme, instead of doing that with the expose, use the expose to lead people down the road to veganism.
Yeah, but it's never, to put that way, it's never.
No, I know.
This shows that animal use is a rights violation. This is cruel. I mean, Joey in his film the other day, he was talking about the cruelty all the time.
Yeah.
It was cruelty.
Yeah, that's why that's the problem I have with the message. It isn't the fact that somebody's done an expose; it's the messaging that goes with that expose that's the problem. I mean, once again, it's the same with, it's the same with, say, that it's the same with actions that people take. I mean, for instance, like with Animal Rising, some of the stuff they've done, the dairy blockade, the sitting at a dairy farm they did, and other actions, related to the farming industry. Yes, it's a great action. The action's great. The problem is the messaging. The problem is that the messaging doesn't encourage people to become vegan. And it's very similar to the problem I have with these exposes. Not the expose, it's the messaging that goes with it.
But they've got good reasons for it. Let me just say before we lose this, Pat, we'll come back to you on this. So we won't lose this, but we'll come back to that. In what I'm trying to say is to try and kind of join these two ideas together with what Tim said before, is in the name of movement unity. Don't we just let that slide?
Well, I think I kind of strike a balance, because I think it's kind of possible to get too obsessed with what other people are doing. So, all of our time is spent on that instead of getting out there and educating the public to go vegan. So I think that there is a balance to be struck. But I think it's still something that is it's valuable to comment on, but to do it in a way where you're not like, these people are doing these things in the best of intentions. They're concerned about what happens to to other animals. They want to, they want that to change. They want to do something about that. They would like to see a vegan world. It's just that I feel that the way they're not going about that in the best way. That's kind of how I would see it, if you see what I mean.
And they go, who are you to tell us that?
Well, it's not. Well, I think we've all, we can all, if somebody wanted to say to me, look, there's something that they think something I'm doing isn't the best way of achieving animal liberation, I'd be happy to hear what they had to say. I mean, they might be right, and I might think, yeah, you're right, and I'm going to do what you said. I don't, as long as it's done like in a kind of, in a respectful way. And I think that, that's a lot of the problem, that often these criticisms aren't kind of like respectful, really. And where you kind of, to give praise where praise is due. Like I'm saying that, for instance, you can get, like a lot of these organizations that do these exposes, for instance, they do promote veganism as well. They'll have other campaigns where they promote veganism. So
Oh
a
yeah,
lot of
yeah.
what they do is
I
really, really
don't
good.
dispute that.
Yeah,
When
yeah.
you when you try to get this message through into the mass media, it's got to be framed in a very, very particular way. Otherwise, it's going to end up being like it always is. We've found a terribly, terribly cruel farm. It was full of animal abuse, right to the RSPCA and all this kind of stuff. If you want to translate all that into a vegan message through the mass media, it makes it much more difficult. I mean, I've done press in Ireland where you've got to do a hell of a lot of work with journalists, and you've got to essentially tell them what your position isn't in order for them to understand what it is.
Yes,
Because
I think that's,
otherwise they'll just use the same words that they've always used.
yeah, I mean, I totally agree, but I think we could at least, for a starter, get the wording of our press releases right and get the wording of our communication with the media right. Because if the wording of our communication isn't, leaves a lot to be desired, then there's no chance that the media isn't going to put that right. Or that, if anything, they're only going to kind of keep it the same and make it worse, aren't they?
Yeah, but this is it. You can't control that really.
No.
And if your shtick is always, we need as many vegans to get out there, become activists, become agitators, and all that. But it's not as though you're going to be able to tell them what to say as well. So if they want to say that veganism is animals only, if they want to say it's all about loving them, if it's an anti-cruelty movement to them, they're going to say that. And so there's nothing much we could do about that apart from welcoming the fact that they're out there. Surely.
Well, yes. I mean, it could be argued it's better for them to be out there than not out there. But I think all we can do is what we're doing at the moment, and just putting across the reasons why it's important that the messaging is right, and then we put out we put across an animal liberationist, stroke animal rights, vegan message rather than the welfarist one, and just hope that that people will take that on board.
See, I mean, we started today. I'll take this off. It's getting a bit hot. We started today with Laura Schleifer talking about Gaza and all that kind of stuff, and we were talking about the interlinks between animal liberation and everything else, and the kind of problems that can create. But there was some pushback then. Veganism is animals only. So in terms of that kind of if you've got people with that kind of position, and it's quite a growing position in the movement, then I'm not quite sure that any discussion with them will change their mind on that, because they're adamant that veganism has nothing to do with humans.
I think maybe there are people whose minds you can't change, but I think you kind of, I mean, I'd ask people like that, well, look, to look at the sort of inconsistencies of that position,
which they would argue there isn't any. It's
well,
just
you see,
stay in your lane.
How is like, caring about the how is caring about the oppression of other animals by humans consistent with not caring about the oppression of one group
because it's not necessarily a question of not caring. It's just that it's not part of the campaign. So it's a question of stay in your lane, and if you stay in your lane, that means that you can grow the movement. And the reason you can grow the movement is that it doesn't matter then if you end up working with people on the far right, and they expect people on the far left to work with people on the far right, for feminists to march with men's rights activism, this kind of stuff, because they're united because of their love of animals, and all the human things are irrelevant. right? Now we're going to say that that can't happen like that, but they insisted that's the way it should be.
Well, I think, once again, all we can do is keep trying to kind of educate people, because, we talk a lot about educating non-vegans to become vegan, but I think we do also have to try to educate a hell of a lot of people who are vegan, or who consider themselves to be vegan, about what veganism really means. So we've got kind of two. I call it outreach and inreach. You see,
Yeah,
to
outreach and inreach, and
yeah.
that's where Tim's point about the elders come in. That we need to be there to encourage the younger people coming into the movement and all that, and we don't do that by just going, "You're doing it wrong," and also you don't understand what veganism is.
Well, I think it depends on how you. If that was all you said, then certainly that wouldn't be helpful. But that isn't all we say. We explain why we feel that way.
And how do they answer? They just tell you to F off.
Well, I think it depends. I think some will do, and some may take notice. But you still, but it's a bit like outreach, isn't it? When you're outreaching to non-vegans, some of them tell us to F off, don't they? But that doesn't stop us from doing it, because we realise the importance of doing it, and we also understand that there are some people that will become vegan because of our efforts.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you. We kind of know what the arguments are. It's just that I thought it was really kind of interesting to see how we kind of operationalize it. That we like the idea of movement unity. There are different strands within the movement, different directions, different tactics, different strategies, and all that to kind of unify all of that. The only way to do it, seems to me, is to take your foot off the pedal of consistency, and you just have to kind of let a lot of things go. It seems to me I think that's the only way it can be done, surely.
Well, I think in practical terms, we probably do have to let a lot of things go, because, like, you can't. We also have only so much time and energy, don't we? And a lot of that is, I think, it's got to be spent on educating non-vegans to become vegans. So, the amount of time and energy we've got for inreach is limited anyway. So that obviously means that a lot's going to be let go, just through that practicality.
Yeah. It's an interesting one, because, of course, if we've got the animals only vegans doing the stalls that you want them to do, then you've got the question of dealing with what they're going to say to people. And I suppose in some ways it's always the same. I remember early days of the VIP where because we used to get a lot of vegetarians coming up, and they would kind of go, "Oh, I'm vegetarian," and what they wanted was to be praised, right? And some of the activists would do that. Oh, that's great. You're halfway there, or kind of thing. One or two more steps and you'll make it, and this kind of stuff. And they, of course, thought that they were being very encouraging and enabling and that kind of stuff. But in actual fact, they were kind of conflating the two ideas in people's minds. First of all, as a diet, and so we kind of had to, as a group, try to manage that. So it's to do with managing the message, which all groups have to do, which tends to be why you end up with, a small group of people who agree, right? As soon as you start working with larger groups, I mean, you can just see this in politics, just think of the Labour Party or something. Then it becomes much more tricky, and your principles have got to be able to bend, then, haven't they?
Well, I think, I mean, I think you kind of keep your own principles the same. It's just a question of, like, to what extent you can really control what other people do. Because, of course, like, if you're kind of just encouraging people, if you just got a message to all vegans that, that we want you to get out there and do outreach, of course, we're not going to be able to control the type of outreach that every single one of them does, are we? So it's just,
quite. That's
yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. So you kind of can't you kind of can't do that, but that isn't a reason to not encourage as many vegans as possible to do outreach.
Hi,
Because
Dennis.
that's
I'll be with you soon. We'll start wrapping up. I want to go back to Pat's question, if I may, Ronnie, if that's all right with you, because it's an interesting one and it gives us something else to talk about than what we normally talk about. Just gone vegan. What do you do to feed your furry friends? So, I mean, this has been controversial over the years, but less so now. Possibly, I don't know. What do you say, Ronnie?
Well, I mean, it's certainly the case that I mean, a lot depends on who your furry friend is. I mean, if if the furry friends are, say, dogs or cats, I mean, there's mounting evidence that both dogs and cats, I think more so with dogs, that thrive on a vegan diet, providing that's probably the vegan diet is properly put together, and you can get these ready-made foods, plant-based vegan foods for dogs and cats that contain all the nutrients they need. Certainly for a dog and a dog or a cat that's kind of in normal health, at least. And I know
how controversial do you think it still is? Because as far as my experience is that dogs have always been fine. They've been fine for decades. It's always been the controversy was about cats.
The cats,
it seems to me now that the plant-based cat foods are actually, in fact, there's been research recently that it's actually superior to the shop-based stuff because that's just slaughterhouse scrapings, isn't it?
Yes, I think the main problem that still exists with the vegan cat food is there still seem to be a lot of cats that won't eat it or are reluctant to eat it, and I think that may be to do with smell, because the sense of taste, a cat's sense of taste, is weaker than ours. We've got a stronger sense of taste than cats, but their sense of smell is massively greater than ours. It's not as great as a dog's, but it's a lot more than us. So they go very much on smell. And I tend to think that there's probably something about
the plant-based stuff is not stinky enough.
Yes, because if they reject that food, it would be because of the smell. You see, and I think this is a problem. I think probably more work needs to be done in that area to make it so that it smells better for cats, and so they're more willing to eat it. But what's in it is fine. What's in it's totally. I don't know about when you come to dogs and cats that have got particular health conditions. How that food would be, but certainly.
Okay, so what's your advice to Pat then?
Well, I would say, to if
try the plant-based stuff.
I'd say try them on the certainly in the UK. There's a website called Veggie Pets, where you can order the plant-based dog and cat food.
If you're still in the comments, Pat, are you in Britain or elsewhere? Because that's important to know, I suppose, isn't it, for us? Because there's going to be. I mean, do you get it from pet shops now, or do you have to still get it online?
You can. Well, you can. Certain places sell do sell that. Particularly the dog. The vegan dog food. I think the cat food may be more difficult to get. I mean, we order. We get the vegan cat food from Veggie Pets. Order it. And I know people that get the dog food from there as well. But there are some places that sell it as well.
Is it the dry stuff? I mean, is the
yes? Well, you can get it in. You can get some of it in tins.
And is that stinkier?
No, and it tends to be very expensive. And of course, you're ordering it through the post. The postage is expensive because you're talking about something, being heavy, a heavy item. But you can always soak the food. You can, and some of it even is meant to be soaked. Like we used to feed our dogs when we had dogs some years ago. We used to feed them Happy Dog, vegan dog food, and you had to soak the Happy Dog, didn't you?
Yeah,
Remember?
that's right,
Yeah.
It'd all expand, wouldn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So we're coming near the close now. I'm going to be talking to Dennis from Sentient Rights Island next, and so we're going to be talking about politics. So do you want to stay for a bit, Ronnie, or what?
Yeah. I'm happy to stay for a little bit. Yes.
Yeah.